In the wake of the Inflation Reduction Act, it felt that the United States was on the verge of an entirely new reindustrialization. Subsidies for clean energy, long-term climate goals were driving billions of dollars of investment into the factories and the infrastructure that would power a cleaner future. A year ago, President Trump took office with an entirely different long-term view of the U.S. economy and priorities for energy. Tax policy changes in One Big Beautiful Bill, or O3B, reduced some of the United States' ambition toward clean energy, but not all. Our goal today is to understand better what the situation looks like at this moment. How much is the drive to reindustrialize going to continue to be a story of clean energy? And how much will the U.S. pursue other goals, geoeconomic advantage, economic security, or the reindustrialization of our economy for the benefit of productivity or automation? And how much is that going to be a clean energy story anyhow? There are a few people that we'd rather talk to about this than Milo Werner, general partner at DCVC and an experienced engineer and entrepreneur in the clean tech space. Milo, welcome to New Shores Live here at CSIS.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
I want to start at the beginning. You've said, to paraphrase, that the Industrial Renaissance is about decarbonization and advanced manufacturing is about solving climate change. That we're really talking about the same thing. Explain that for me.
Yeah. When I think about how we're going to reindustrialize the United States, we're going to do it with advanced technologies. We're not going to go back and build legacy factories. We're going to commercialize advanced technologies. The advanced technologies that we have right now for reshoring, heavy industry, and generating more electrons is clean. It's all clean. We haven't done combustion research in decades, and so these advanced technologies that we're building today are all clean, more efficient, and many of them less expensive.
Now, let's break down clean a little bit. So what should the listener or the viewer have in mind when you say like advanced manufacturing and reshoring is clean? Is it a higher reliance on electricity? Is it battery technologies? Like, what does the modern factory look like that it distinguishes it from the sort of blast furnace-based factories that you might have in your imagination or have seen in films?
Yes, they're all electrified, and we think about material transformation. We're talking about moving from combustion to electrical, chemical, biological. And when you look at the efficiency of combustion, it's about 50%. When we look at the efficiency of electrical, chemical, or biological, they're 95% or higher efficiency, which is what is enabling us to build these kind of smaller, more modular, regional industrial facilities that are more efficient, cheaper, faster.
And are we finding this efficiency in a sort of like progressive marginal gains, or is it really a revolution? And to motivate that question, yesterday we were looking at some statistics for manufacturing and industrial output last year, which have held pretty steady. Electricity consumption in the industrial sector, however, was up about 2% year over year. Is that the efficiency gain that you're talking about? Like, is this an ongoing revolution, or is it something in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. For sure, as we're generating electricity, we're getting more and more efficient at creating electrons. When we think about onshoring manufacturing, just the reality is when we look at production that's in China, they have very relatively low cost labor, and they have these mega facilities, right? So it's been relatively cheap to buy products from China. So now when we onshore it, we have a higher cost of electricity, our labor costs are higher. We really have to automate that manufacturing, and we're automating it with advanced processes that are all electrified.
And so when we think about this real industrialization, you're a general partner at DCVC. Where do you sit in the chain of bringing these new advanced technologies online and making them a commercial reality?
Yeah. We have an energy and climate fund that is focused on investing after proof of concept, but before commercial traction. So this is the stage at where they might have a demonstration in the parking lot, or a small demonstration facility close by, and now they're ready to commercialize that technology. And the work that we do with them is helping them build the industrial facility, build a team around that, and really launch into production with commercial partners.
So I have heard anecdotally that the U.S. problem is that we have our universities, our scientific and sort of like bench scale engineering capacity is second to none. The challenge is that when you want to build an X-ray lithography machine, or you want to actually manufacture battery cathodes, that capacity has been lost over the last 30 years. Is that kind of roughly correct in your experience? And there are plenty of counterexamples, some of which you've got experience with.
Yeah. I don't think that you're wrong. When we look at the major technologies that have been developed in the United States, for sure we have upheld this gold standard of like develop the IP, develop the breakthrough. But when we look at the value capture, when we look at the value that China was able to capture by commercializing lithium-ion batteries, solar cells, electric cars, we see that they've captured about $150 billion of commercial value. So it's great that those are all technologies that we created here in the United States. But when we look at what we lost when we didn't commercialize those technologies, it was a massive part of the economy.
And what is in your view? You're helping companies do this. You're making investments. Is the common understanding that environmental rules are too strict? There's too much litigation. You have expensive labor. Is that the correct diagnosis for what keeps the U.S. From having to sort of actively make these kinds of investments? Or what do you see as the single biggest factors in keeping the U.S. from being kind of at the forefront of a lot of these manufacturing technologies?
Yeah. I actually don't see those challenges as like our real blocker. I think there's two main blockers. There's one, as you pointed out earlier, we really haven't done this work in decades of commercializing advanced technologies. We've essentially lost an entire generation to not producing, right? And so we have some people who are kind of like the generation before the last generation who are running industrial facilities and have experience building them, but like we have an intermediate generation that just never did that work. And so now we have this new generation of commercial technical experts that are going at it, but they're a little bit alone at it. And so they're working as hard as they can, but there's no way around it. We haven't given them a great base to leap off from. The other piece that we're facing is a capitalization issue. And when I think about like we lost a generation in people who have done industrialization, we also lost a generation of financiers, capital providers who have also been doing this information. So we end up talking with a lot of banks and financial institutions, lenders, insurers, and they say, well, I don't know how to evaluate the risk of this project, right? It's a first of a kind project, or we haven't done it before. I don't know how to associate the risk that I'm underwriting here. And so it's very difficult for me to either not give you any financial debt support, or I just won't underwrite it. And so that also has been a big problem. It's like, how do we support these companies capital-wise?
So it might not even be, if I'm hearing you correctly, it might not even be that there is more risk or the U.S. can't be cost competitive, but we have like an opportunity cost problem that our finance industry has lots of ways that it can make money. And if you're sort of unfamiliar with commercialization of advanced technology, well, you can do something over here instead.
Yeah. I would definitely say that's perfect description of the issue.
So what's the most important thing, this is on the minds of policymakers. What's the most important thing that you think the policymaking community can help? Is it bang the drum and use the bully pulpit? Is it sort of use these mechanisms of industrial policy that we've seen arise from both parties over the last few years? Is it making sure there's plenty of funding for first of a kind projects? What's the thing that matters the most?
Yeah. With every large reindustrialization movement we've seen, the federal government has played a big role in it. So there's no way around it. We need support from the federal government. Right now, we're at this place where we've enacted these tariffs, and can be akin to building a wall around your garden. But unless you water and fertilize your garden, it's close to impossible for those companies to flourish. So like what we think about there is tax incentives, loan programs, purchasing from the Department of War. And I think we've been doing a good job at purchasing, but it's been very pointed, meaning, the federal government invested in Intel. They've invested in a number of like specific companies, including startups. It's just incredibly pointed investments, right? Like we need a sprinkler system that's set up so that more companies can access this, right? Like if we're going to really reindustrialize the United States, we need to incentivize and provide debt facilities to hundreds of companies. Not right now, we could probably count the number of companies on like two hands.
Yeah, I hear you. And there are so many mechanisms that are available, right? There's the buy side. Well, the government can procure this set of critical minerals from a domestic manufacturer, or the government will procure new nuclear reactors, or the USG can use its spending power in lots of ways. Then you've got the sort of subsidy programs like we saw in the IRA, or the remnant pieces of those, or the modifications in O3B. You've also got sort of general tax policy changes. You mentioned tariffs. You could think about the investment tax credits or depreciation schedules that were part of O3B. Are there elements, are all those at this moment coming together to help drive the revolution that you see as ongoing?
I think we still need more. We had the LPO office out of the Department of Energy.
Now the Office of Energy Dominance Financing, yeah.
Yes, which was very transformative. I think that's a very similar vehicle could come out of the Department of War. Yesterday I was sitting on a panel with the innovation unit for the Army, and they were talking about how they were going to convert one of their buildings into a drone manufacturing line. And that's great, but that's like one company is going to get that contract. We need honestly, we need like 25 drone companies to get a contract to make drones. Somehow we have to move away from just picking one winner to realizing that we need to pick many winners. And when you take a lens at that from the private investing industry, like from my perspective, we look at investing in drones for sure. And when the federal government picks one drone company to back, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, would we bet on a company that is not the drone company that the federal government picked? The federal government has endless money. They're going to place a giant PO. Like, are we going to bet against the federal government? And so when you think about it, it kind of like puts a damper on the general space if the federal government picks one company out of that space.
Oh, interesting. So how then do you think about prioritization? Because if I put myself in the mind of a federal policymaker, especially in the executive branch, we need to like make changes today, right? And so I can understand why you sort of take that firm by firm, prospect by prospect approach. What's the alternative?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just the federal government needs to start thinking about like how do we incentivize a wide group of manufacturers to support this movement.
Right.
And I think tax incentives or investment incentives are a great strategy. I also think there could be like purchasing diversification philosophies that could be put in place through the Department of War, right? Like I think there's a number of different mechanisms just to try and spread out the incentives to help mobilize the free markets to support this movement. Right?
You're talking about watering the whole garden as opposed to one planter.
Yes.
So in this context, let's talk a little bit about the IRA, right? Because the IRA, I think, tried to do this for clean tech broadly defined, right? Not only was there demand side subsidy for deploying wind and solar and batteries, but there was supply side funding to produce the battery technologies, the turbines, we're still subsidizing solar manufacturing in the United States. So it seemed like when you picked a big enough sector, you got a lot of investment. Was that as transformative as it appears it was from Washington?
I think it was hugely transformative. And I think it was amazing. We saw an incredible growth of companies using those facilities. I also run a nonprofit called Next Gen Industry Group, which tracks 180 companies in the US that are privately funded, commercializing advanced technologies. And many of those companies were kind of able to transform from this fledgling lab space into building their own commercial facility, leveraging those incentives. And when you think about mobilizing 180 companies to move from proof of concept into the commercialization phase, it's undeniable that's a huge transformation. So yes, and I don't think there's only one way to do it, right? I think there's many different policies that can support that. The current administration doesn't have to use that strategy. They just need to figure out a strategy that is akin to that and bring that to the current environment.
Right, and you might look at, sort of a different set of sectors, or you might, instead of indexing on emissions, index on economic security or energy costs, or you could think of a variety of things. Let's, if we can, I want to hold on the climate and clean energy space just for a moment, because the media narrative, as the administration has backed away from climate as a priority, and O3B really did draw down a lot of subsidies for clean energy in the United States. The media narrative is that whole thing's kind of over. From your perspective as an investor, can you give us a sense of where the commercial realities are? How much of that is ongoing? How much are companies that were looking to make one type of investment are now just moderating or changing strategies? What's happening out in the marketplace?
Yeah, for sure. There's been like a capital stack transformation that's happened in probably the past 2 years. When we look back at the beginning of, like 2021, 2022, we saw this kind of like glut of equity in the market. And that is when there was a lot of announcements being made about companies starting new industrial facilities in the climate space. And they were underwriting those facilities with equity. And that is very dilutive for all parties involved. And it's hard to draw the line between the value of the company that is required in order to take in $500 million of equity and the actual value that the public markets will associate with it. And so then over kind of 2024, 2025, what we saw is companies coming to this realization, right-sizing their valuations, and leveraging debt in much smarter ways. And so what we saw is these companies become increasingly less equity capital intensive. We also saw a movement towards modular manufacturing. And this is kind of this concept of starting into production in a light capital way. And what we see is a lot of technologies that are flourishing today are kind of smaller scale, and you can incrementally build out the industrial facility in smaller steps as you prove and validate the technology is meeting its techno-economics. You can continue to expand.
Maybe tell me a little bit more about that. How does that work? So if you're what does modular manufacturing look like?
Yeah, I have two examples. I think one example is Mainspring Energy. Mainspring builds a 250 kilowatt hour fuel flexible generator. So it can run on biogas, it can run on natural gas, it can run on all sorts of clean hydrogen, seamlessly, whatever gas that you have, it'll run on. And you can put one of those in place to back up your supermarket. You could put 10 in place to provide backup for a critical facility like a wastewater treatment facility. You could put 50 in place and put them on the grid and act as kind of grid stabilization. So that's an example of a technology where it is modular. When we look at the manufacturing, they're made on a line that right now is based out of Mexico, and it just single flows through the line. It was very capital light to get into production.
Oh, that's really interesting. So rather than think about like, if you make mistakes or you have to learn along the way how to make this better, cheaper, more reliable, you do that through the number of units you're producing rather than through like a very boutique engineering process where you're doing one thing at a time.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a theme that we kind of see building out through the industry is this concept of modularity.
Yeah.
And it just requires companies to get into production and start to scale, validate the technology at scale using a much more capital light process.
And then that is the story of a lot of the technologies that at least, I've watched over the last 20 years, right? The solar famously has fallen in cost by an order of magnitude. And partially because the manufacturing is highly modular, there's a lot of chances for experimentation and learning. Seems that the same thing has happened with lithium-ion batteries. And you're saying, I'm hearing from you, that extends to like lots of advanced manufacturing, and could tell us a lot about what.
As we look at like modular nuclear reactors, right? We're seeing all sorts of technologies. Look at fervo, advanced geothermal, right? Look at all these technologies are modular.
So should we be thinking about the future of advanced technology or advanced manufacturing, producing goods where you have a lot of little parts working in parallel as opposed to large single units?
For sure, that is the trend that we're seeing.
And how much does that allow manufacturing then, as I get way over my skis, how does that then allow manufacturing to be, much more distributed, right? Rather than the steel industry of old being mostly located in Pittsburgh, Ohio, and the broader Northwest or Midwest, excuse me. Do you have a manufacturing base that can be much more regionally diversified, globally diversified, because you're not making things very large in one way? It's much more flexible.
Yes.
Is that a reasonable hypothesis?
That is the vision. That is the vision of the future, is kind of make it when you need it, where you need it. You don't have to order way in advance. It allows you to just build to what you need. And I think there's a win there that's sometimes lost in that, when we look at something like the apparel industry, which has an incredible amount of waste in it, 30% of all apparel is thrown away or burned because it just doesn't fit or isn't quite right. That apparel is ordered 18 months in advance. And as you had to make guesses way in advance, you can never reorder, it arrives, and now you are stuck with whatever you got. Imagine a world where now you had automated weaving and sewing, and now companies like Walmart or The Gap are just making what they need when they need it.
Oh my gosh, that's super interesting. It's almost like Star Trek, right? They have that machine where you can dial up a hot tea or a fresh sweater. And like, I don't think you're quite there yet, maybe, I don't know. But like you end up sort of shifting the supply chain much more locally and having manufacturing like much closer to customers.
Yeah, yes.
Huh. Okay. So I want to, this is the energy program. The big energy narrative for this year is electricity cost. Data centers are at the heart of that story right now. But I think, as you probably recognize, the role of electricity is just much more important in the future, we think, than it has been over the last 30 years. So how much is that trend affecting how advanced manufacturing companies, firms, investors like yourself are thinking about what they should be investing in? Can modular, advanced, additive manufacturing kind of help us reduce the cost of energy and make it cleaner and make it more available?
Yeah, it is kind of like a circular reference, is what I would call it. The time to bring on a new industrial facility right now is really driven by the speed at which you can get access to electricity, and many developers are quoting 5 to 7 years to get access to a new industrial facility on the grid. So for sure, we are laser focused on like, how can you bring more electrons onto the grid? And how maybe can you think about having more autonomy for facilities that are new, kind of off the grid, being able to produce their own electrons, right? So like, even as you're thinking like, oh, should I be thinking about investing in additive manufacturing? You could also think about like, maybe I should be investing in microgrids that are going to be used on site to create those electrons.
Right. But you also hear these like famous examples like transformers, right? The transformer supply chain is famously like it's like hard to grow for reasons I don't understand. You've got, if you're going to build out this big electricity system, is there like a lot of momentum in an investment in that space that hopefully will help us resolve our problems in the next 5 years?
I think there's an incredible amount of movement in the free market investor space backing advanced energy generation technologies, right. For sure, 100%. I mean, so
and when I said transformers, I saw that you're either familiar of talking people out of this example, or it felt like you have more immediate experience. Which is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the grid is going through a really interesting transformation right now, where we're moving from a signal created from like spinning devices, right? That's how historically we've created the AC current, to now where we're digitizing it. And that means that we're doing that through a number of switches. Solid state transformers is kind of like the topic of today, right? And you just make this grid, you can shift the peak of the grid, you can make the wave wider or shorter, right? You can do all these things that we never before could do. And some people say like, oh, why do we need to do that? Who cares? Well, as we have more loads that come onto the grid or off the grid that are direct current, any solar, any battery transformation, any data center, those are all direct current systems. They cause harmonics and frequency within the signal of the grid. And so we've had troubles with that. So like traditional transformers are probably not the answer to the future. Kind of this digitization of the grid is going to be the answer to the future.
What do you make? I mean, you've got experience across a wide variety of areas. You were at Tesla, so you're familiar with like kind of the greatest story of reindustrialization. You know, for us dilettantes, like what are important things to know about what it actually takes to get it done?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mission is what drives everyone. Everyone wants to leave this world in a better place than when they arrived. And so I think really correlating the mission with the technology that you're working on is what is going to motivate the people to come, the best minds to come, and really drive it to fruition. When I think back to Tesla, you know, the mantra was like, we are solving climate change. Like right. Bringing electrification to transportation is critical, right? And every morning we woke up and thought, shoot, how do we get this done faster? And it's a real driving force. So I think the mission behind these companies, just continuing to uphold that mission, is incredibly important.
And how should we think about, you know, we are having a very America-focused conversation, but if you take a problem like climate change, that's a global problem, right? So how do you, when evaluating a company or an investment or a sector, how do you think about the U.S. and the development of a more fulsome role for American companies or IP in addressing global problems, right? How do we share what we learn? How do we share our wins around the world? Yeah.
I mean, fundamentally, these regional size manufacturing facilities are going to be everywhere. They're going to be here, they're going to be in Europe, they're going to be in Africa, they're going to be all over the world, in Australia. And so when we make investments, we think like, okay, we're building a building block that is then going to be globally oriented. And there are a lot of global investors that invest in the United States venture capital industry. And they're incredibly motivated to reindustrialize their regions. We're here in the US, so we don't hear about it that much, but the reality is on an international stage, they also want access to technologies that allow them to reindustrialize their countries.
And how much is that signal also clean? I mean, you know, in Washington right now, there's a lot of skepticism amongst the administration about, you know, the Green New Scam and how much the focus on clean energy asks too much of voters and taxpayers for too little benefit. But you know, from your perspective, what do you say to that argument? And what is the market asking for?
Yeah. For sure, the international markets are asking for clean technologies. They want technologies that can be regionalized to reindustrialize their countries, that provide good jobs, a backbone of their economy, and clean power. I mean, that is what they're asking for. And I think there's going to be an incredible amount of demand beyond the U.S. into the international.
And you've talked about this moment being a sort of make lemonade from lemons moment for the clean tech industry. So what do you say to them at this moment and how they share their success and win allies here and around the world?
Yeah. I mean, really the way I think about it and what I say to them is like, this community, the climate community, has been working on reindustrializing the United States for over a decade, probably 2 decades. We are like the OG of reindustrialization. And so like, I know you're not feeling that much love right now, but like our community has the most knowledge in how we are going to reindustrialize the United States. And so, carry that flag with pride.
Milo, thank you for joining me. This has been such an interesting conversation. I've learned a lot, right? Like 2 things that really stick out: this future of modularity and sort of small sizes stacking up to big effects is going to be a big part of what we should be watching for. And then it's heartening to hear how much the advanced manufacturing and reindustrialization drive is both benefiting from and a enabler of cheaper, cleaner, and better power for all of our other economic needs. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, I mean, I think this is just amazing. I love that you're having this conversation. It's something that's very needed, and I'm excited for the future episodes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Colleagues who've joined us online, thank you as well for your kind attention. Do check out Milo's work at DCVC or through the Next Gen Industrial Group, and we will see you next time on New Shores Live here from CSIS.